Practical Living with Martinique. I'm your host, Martinique Brown, and if this is your very first time ever tuning into the show, I'm so happy that you have decided to tune in. We have such a great show for you today. Today, we are actually talking about the importance of setting boundaries and how to do it. I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is something that I have not really struggled with because people have just said, Martinique, you're kind of mean. And I'm like, you think so? I'm like, I don't think so. But for individuals that do have, a tendency to always say, yes, this is the show for you. I was able to read this book by Joyce Myers. It's called, and it really just dealt with people pleasers. And I think that was actually in the name of the title. Really good book. It really just freed me up with just having more confidence in saying no to individuals. Let me introduce our life coach to you today. She is Treyonda Towns, and she is going to really just help you to have a better understanding of what it means to set boundaries and why it's important to do this. If this is your very first time ever tuning into the episode, welcome, welcome, welcome. So specifically with this show, I created this so that you can have a better understanding of particular topics that we discuss, as well as get to know the life coaches that's here on the shows as well. And so you can actually follow Treyonda's Facebook page because all of her contact information is in the description box. So welcome, Treyonda. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure. I'm excited.
I'm excited that you're on the show as well. Can you just explain to the viewers who you are and just let them know a little bit more about your area of specialty as a life coach?
Yes, my name is, once again, Treyonda Towns. My specialty of work is life transformational work, crisis and trauma. When we talk about life transformational, just kind of walking with individuals that have been through some intense life changes. It could be in any area, but also a mental health coach. Once again, crisis and trauma has always been that focus, because a lot of time in our culture, we are programmed to overlook it. It's taboo. That doesn't happen to us. We are okay. Our resilience is taken for granted. And so that's the area. My company name is called The Flow, Life Transformations. And that's where we do what we do to make sure that we as a people are strong and healthy physically, mentally, socially.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know what? We actually have a couple of viewers that just tuned in. Thank you, Lakeisha and Jessica, for tuning in. If you guys can go ahead and share this video now. And Jessica, I know that you were just saying that you would love to just share this with somebody. Just go ahead and share it to their page, and that's what I recommend to the viewers right now. Make sure you go ahead and share this video now. If you know somebody that's, is a little passive, they always saying yes when they know that they're already stretched too thin, this might be a really good episode for them to watch. So just go ahead and share it to their page, and hopefully they'll be able to tune in or even just catch it on the replay. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic specifically is because it does bring you so much freedom when you do set those boundaries with people. Treyonda, if you can just tell our viewers, why is it even important for someone to set boundaries?
Well, there's a quote by Brené Brown that says, daring to set boundaries is just taking a risk. It's about having courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others, right? And so a lot of times, I know for me, because I'm a hard person, I always want others to have that sense of safety, a caring, just giving person.
Yeah.
And I didn't know when to stop, to the point where I was giving too much. And so in that, just, being transparent and, not just talking about boundaries, that was a part of my growth as well. just finding out that it's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to set healthy boundaries. And it's important to have boundaries because that develops the line of how much to give and how much someone can take.
Yeah.
It's designed to protect us physically, mentally. It also establishes our identity in our own, in where responsibility lies, whether we are responsible or others are responsible for their actions concerning us, right? And so, and boundaries just important. It's those guidelines, it's those limits of
Yeah.
how much you're willing to go in allowing others to take from you. Um,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people, even things, and when I say things in situations, would take until there's nothing else to take, whether that's your job, whether your community service, whether that's your family at times. um, and that's not out of being malicious, but um, when there's a need, there's always um, that example, or that, I guess, what's the word, that attempt or that desire to just take,
Yeah.
to fill that need, whether intentional or unintentional.
Definitely. And you know what you made me think about, my mother, she is truly a giver. And I know when it comes to her finances, sometimes she's able to give to somebody. And so that doesn't mean go hit my mama. But the reason why I said that is because, I told my mom, I was like, man, that is so nice of you. And my mom is very upfront and honest and direct. And she's like, well, Martinique, if I don't have it, I don't have it. I can't give something that I don't have. And I was thinking about that with setting boundaries. If you know you cannot do something, you have to tell yourself, you have to tell that individual, no, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. Because you depleting your energy, or other people's problems and things
That's it.
sometimes.
That's it. And money is a boundary. There are many areas that we set boundaries that we don't think that we should, could, or need to set boundaries on, because that's just how life flows. But like you said, money in itself is an energy, right? It's your livelihood.
Yeah.
You don't have it, you give it all away. You dry up, you die, you lose things.
So now we actually have a question on the floor. And Lakeisha asks, what if your boundaries causes your family to reject you? How would you answer that? And Lakeisha, thank you so much for that question.
Well, and a lot of times that's the hardest area when it comes to boundaries, are those that's close to us, especially family.
Yeah.
But that, once again, it goes back to just understanding that boundaries is an integral part of self-care. And we owe it to ourselves to walk in and take time for self-care. And a lot of times that could be painful.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to relationships, right? And so it's not a matter of do I do it? Sometimes it's a matter of how do I begin to do it, especially when it comes to those relationships. That's very important to us. And so it goes to the way of how do you begin to do that, because you have to remember now you have your time and your emotions is at risk. And that rejection could be very detrimental to us. And so just being mindful about self-care, where we can go a little deeper with that. But just remembering self-care it's a part of our supportive living. It's part of our being healthy.
Right.
It eliminates stress. It eliminates depleting our self-esteem. It takes a lot. It does a lot for us.
Um, and I think one of the things that we're uncomfortable with talking about is the rejection side of it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I think that that's the reality of it. Some people may no longer be in your life because you have decided to put yourself first in
Yeah.
those situations.
Yes.
And if people already know that you're that yes person, that they
Mhm.
always can depend on you, and not saying it that people can't depend on you, but when they always know that they can run to you and rely on you and really just suck every bit of energy out of you,
Yeah.
mentally, physically, and possibly even financially, then you have to help them to get the hint. I'm not going to let you
Yeah.
use me like this. And how do you help people become comfortable with that talk? Because I never feel like, okay, I'm just gonna straight off just always keep telling Treyonda no. But maybe I just need to sit down and just have a talk and generalize it and say, um, I just watched this show called Practical Living, and I realized, and I really realized that I need to start caring for myself a little bit more. And I just will hope that you will begin to support me, because there are things that may change. How do you have that? That might be the talk, Lakeisha, that you have with that person or those people. But how do you start that conversation with individuals?
It's going to be difficult. At first, you will feel very uncomfortable. You will feel like you're being selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt will just take over you. You may even be embarrassed,
Yeah.
right? Because you're like, that's my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
They need me. They love me, especially when it has become a pattern. And so change and
Mm-hmm.
transition is always difficult. And sometimes you could do it a little by little pieces, and then there's times there just have to be a straight cut off until you find ways and you build up to ways to be able to be whole and present, of setting those boundaries. And it's going to take practice, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take determination to get there, because you're going to have anxiety with it. It's going to bring a whole, you're going to be triggered into some things, fear, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, they're going to reject me again, just when I felt comfortable. And so there are different ways that, you could do it, and start practicing, actions you could take, like the issue of money, like you say, to say, well, this time, I don't have it. Um, and you don't have to go into reasons why you don't have it.
Yep.
Um, if people can't respect that you have your own family, that you have needs, in that respect, that there's times that you have, because at this point, a lot of times, and I'm gonna say we, because I've been there, you have given so much out of your substance that it has left you in danger. It has
Mm-hmm.
left you without being able to meet your needs. And people will see that. And the very ones that you've sacrificed to give into are not the ones that rush in to give back. And
Mm-hmm.
so just practice that, just having that, like you said, having that conversation. Well, unfortunately, at this time, I'm unable to help you. Or if there's a situation where people could be mean with their words, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just having that conversation and saying, practice, and sometimes it's a practice, right? Because that fear, you have to
Yeah.
get you to think no. Those two letters bring out the best conversation. Right?
Uh-huh.
They're the
Uh-huh.
most powerful words. No, and not looking back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in allowing that to be your standard, not
Yep.
just for others, but for yourself, and not look at it for the matter of fact of others, but for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying, at this time, or being okay, saying, hey, that didn't make me feel good. What you
Mm-hmm.
said did not make me feel good.
Right.
Um, in being okay with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, you have a right to say those words, they embarrass me, or that was out of place to say that right there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or can we go to the side, or can I talk with you for a minute?
Mm-hmm.
And just pushing past that fear of just going in and saying enough is enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that I'm going to be really transparent.
Mhm.
I've had a tough time with um, taking up for myself, meaning that sometimes I allow people to say things to me. And of course, I have a comeback like that next day after I thought about it. Let it resonate. Like, oh, Martinique, you should have said such and such. And so I've learned that many times these people that's disrespectful, and not talking about people that disrespect your boundaries, but people that just say things to you that's disrespectful, many a times that's their characteristic. So it's going to happen again. And so I know with myself, I would say, oh, Martinique, you should have spoke up for yourself. And I don't want people to watch this and say, okay, every single time you didn't set your boundary, then that's it. Wipe it. Just say to yourself, okay, I'm a people pleaser, and don't address it anymore. It's okay if you don't do it that first time, but then the next time it happens, you just say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to tell this person no. So don't beat yourself up when you don't do it that first time. So I know Lakeisha actually said, what about emotional boundaries?
That's a big, yeah, and that's a big one.
Uh-huh.
That is a really big one, because after a while, when those boundaries are not set, it becomes abusive,
Mm-hmm.
and people don't really understand the context of abuse, right? Abuse is literally using and taking things for granted. I used to always say, abuse is a form of utilizing something that it was not intended, or how is not intended to be used,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so to continue to do that over and over again, knowing that it hurts someone, knowing that it causes a drawback, knowing that it brings a person's self-esteem down, knowing that your intention is to take control or
Mm-hmm.
have control of someone, is allowing someone, or identifying someone's manipulative tactics,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to emotions. And so that that goes back to setting boundaries healthy, because we can set boundaries, like you said, many ways. Like you said, always, if you, excuse me, if you always have a comeback, you can always have a comeback, but is that the right time to come back? Is that
Right.
the right way to come back? So there's the line between setting healthy boundaries and unhealthy boundaries. When we want to set healthy boundaries, we want to do it in a calm manner, which may be hard. We want to do it quick. We want to do it in a way where that we're using the least possible words at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
where that person or that thing knows that this is it. This is non-negotiable,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not getting ready to have a long conversation about it. We're going to go in. We're going to go quick, and so we want to make sure that we stay in that vein, and being mindful of not waiting until we are angry, and we're not doing it in an explosive emotional manner, that we have not finally come to a place of wanting to cut it off when we've built up resentment for that person, a distaste for that person, where we're ready to deny ourselves respect. Because, of course, someone that's emotionally, I guess, manipulative and have taken you for granted, or taking your boundaries for granted, of course, is looking to blame. So they're really not going to accept accountability in their part. They're going to say,
Right.
see, you know, you did this and
Mm-hmm.
but no, it didn't start there. And
Mm-hmm.
so just be mindful of your own accountability,
Right.
identifying the triggers within yourself
Mm-hmm.
and what that feels like.
Yeah, and that's really good that you mentioned that. in regards to what it feels like, because we can't ignore our own feelings in this, and sometimes we can blame ourselves like, oh, well, like, let's say that I was internalizing it and I'll say, oh, Martinique, you shouldn't be so sensitive, or I'll say, oh, Martinique, well, maybe if you wouldn't have done such and such, then they wouldn't have said this to you. So we blame ourselves first instead of saying, well, no, this individual should not have done this, and so that's why in setting your boundaries, or even specifically with those emotional boundaries,
Yes.
just look at how you're feeling, look at how you're feeling after that individual has crossed those emotional boundaries
Yes.
for you. And so, Lakeisha, I hope we answered your question in that. If we didn't, please elaborate a little more for us. But did you want to step away a little bit for?
Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay. So, but guys, I'll just talk to you for a minute. So,
Ooh, hold on.
okay. So, but what I wanted to talk to you all about is it's very important that we do set these boundaries, and not saying that everything is going to be hunky dory when you do try to establish these boundaries with people. Just like I said before, um, with boundaries, people are so used to the way that we used to act. People are so used to um, us always telling them yes. And so that's why I think it's so beneficial to first have these conversations with these individuals, especially people that has had a relationship with you for a very long time, because the first thing that they might say to you is, oh, you've changed, because you're no longer always just saying, yes, I'll do such and such for you. And so you really just owe it to yourself to make sure that you set those boundaries for people to really just realize I'm changing. And you really just feel so much better about yourself, because it really does help you to build that self-confidence in just expressing how you feel to people. And another thing that I wanted to just mention to you is we really have to recognize the people that's in our life. If we have decided to do something in our life that is going to make us a better person, a stronger person, a more emotionally stable person. Because remember, when you begin to build this confidence and you're able to freely express yourself to individuals, you do have a newfound freedom within yourself. And you have to recognize that these individuals that are not able to take on this evolution of the new you, they either have to, one, get with the program, or two, maybe they will drop out of your life. And I think that that's one of the things that we're a little bit uncomfortable with, these people no longer being in our life. I am a person that is really big on people are in our lives for a season. And I know that's an expression that we typically use for friends, but we don't usually talk about that for family members, because family members are like I said, family members. We don't choose who our family members are. And so with that, I think you have to take it amongst yourself to know when, there's only so much time that I'm going to spend with this person. And it's nothing about being mean, but remember, you're trying to just make yourself whole. So we're going to see if Treyonda is ready to join us again. But remember, it's all about just really just making yourself whole, and really also just making sure that you are becoming your best self, you know. And so you just really, it's nothing wrong with putting yourself first. Not saying like you being conceited or anything like that, but remember, when you are becoming whole, then you are more of a benefit to people in the long run, you know. And sometimes you might have to have that uncomfortable talk, because sometimes people need to realize their own faults sometimes, because maybe nobody ever told them that. You know, I think sometimes you overstep those boundaries.
Yes.
But what do you feel are the dangers of being a people pleaser?
Well, the risk of being a people pleaser is the greatest risk of it all is that you lose yourself. You lose
Mm-hmm.
your own identity in trying to please someone else. Because no matter how you try to please someone else, it's never going to be enough. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of trying in the attempt, um, you've become someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to what you were saying. How do you stay whole to the point that you are living your best self, that you are presenting your best self, if you're constantly going on this wheel of trying to please other people and meeting their needs and making sure you're not hurting their feelings and making sure they're not offended and making sure every task and want that they desire is met. And there's just times that there's just needs others are going to have that you can't meet, because those are needs that they need to meet on their own.
Yep,
It's
that's
their
good.
responsibility. We're not responsible for others to a certain capacity. Once they become of age, a baby, yes,
Mm-hmm.
but when we're talking about a full adult that's walking in their adultism, um, we're not responsible
Mm-hmm.
for making them whole.
Yep.
Um, we are accountable for our actions of not causing them damage
Mm-hmm.
um, or offense, but we're not responsible
That's good.
for keeping them whole.
Mm-hmm.
That's some work that they have to do on their own, or you could do together,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially when it comes to relationships, especially when it comes to the aspect of it's I guess an employment
Mm-hmm.
relationship, co-worker, things like that, teamwork.
Yeah.
Everyone's responsible at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, that's where the boundary is. Boundaries are those limits. It's a guidelines. It's where the give meets the take, and it
Mm-hmm.
stops there.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lakeisha actually asked a question, and I just need her to just tell me what she means by it. So she asks, how do you gradually get your back? I want to say she's saying, how do you gradually get your backbone? But I'm not going to put words in her mouth. So Lakeisha, if you could go ahead and just type out that question for me again. But I'm really glad that you mentioned that it's not our responsibility to always meet that person's needs. And so I know that you're a Christian also. And one of the things that I realized, I actually read this in a book, and it was just saying that we have to stop thinking that we're always the one responsible to get this person out of a situation. Maybe God has allowed this situation to occur in somebody's life in order for them to start depending on Him. And so, with that, I really like the fact that you mentioned it's not always our responsibility to make this individual whole. It's not always our responsibility to be nurturing and doing being at the beck and call of this, of these people, And so I think that that's what we have to become more comfortable with, recognizing that although I may be able to, maybe it's more beneficial if I don't, for my sake as well as your sake,
Mhm.
you know?
And once again, that's the boundary right
Mm-hmm.
there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just being people of faith, the word talks about boundaries, right? It says a man don't work, he don't eat, right?
Mhm.
It talks about, um, is it better to continue to give him the fish, or is it better to teach him how to fish, right? And so being mindful of that, once again, sometimes we get caught up in that, and
Mhm.
we've crossed the line, we've crossed the boundary of trying to save people. It's not our duty to save people, it's our duty to bring them the information, the word, to lead them to what it is, and not become that God
Mhm.
in their
That's
eyes.
good.
Right?
That's good.
It's our responsibility and our duty to be an example of what that is.
Mhm.
Just like a child may not can read, but they understand your actions,
Mhm.
right? And what you're trying to tell in that story.
Mhm.
And so just being mindful in that, not handicapping people,
That's
not
good.
becoming enablers, because in a manner we sometimes cause people to operate in a disability,
Yeah.
right?
That's so true.
Right? Because we're not helping to bring the best out of them in their full capacity of functioning. We were
Yeah.
all created in a greatness, and when you have those, a lot of times individuals that struggle with being in control to
Mhm.
the point that they are enabling and causing people to operate out of a disability and dysfunction,
Mhm.
totally unhealthy, and especially in the manner of faith people. We You've crossed boundaries, because
Yeah.
now you're operating as a god, and that's not what he called us to be. We are, yes,
Mhm.
we are in his likeness, I understand that, but once again, are we leaving room for them to have their own faith, to have their own belief, to have their own testimony, to have their own experience that he can, or that where how we've gotten there, that
Mhm.
that same capacity of miracle and strength and all of that can happen in their lives.
Yeah.
So whether others want to accept it or not, there's still a form of boundary even in that.
Mhm. It
Right.
is. And that is so true. That is really good that you mentioned that, because in this book that I'm reading now, it was just talking about how when someone begins to depend on you like that, because this book is specifically talking about like the spiritual growth of an individual. So when somebody
Yeah.
begins to depend on you for their spiritual growth, once you are no longer in their life, they're like, well, how am I going to grow? You
Hmm.
still grow because you have that, you're cultivating that relationship with
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So if that person is constantly dependent on you to supply their every need, then how will they even get strong in knowing that they can accomplish something by themselves? you
Right.
know
Right.
and so Lakeisha actually said her question is, how do you gradually get your power back? That's a good question, Lakeisha.
Mhm. It once again goes back to cutting off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every second, every minute minute that we are breathing and living, there should be some form of growth and change in us. Um, and a lot of times, getting your power back, you just have to take it, because
Yep.
no one's going to give you your power back. You just have to take it,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how uncomfortable it may be. But being mindful, like to do it healthy,
Yeah.
starting with establishing a support system, right? Allowing yourself to be in circle with individuals that will support you through your decision, that will
Mm-hmm.
support you through the ouch moments,
Mm-hmm.
those difficult moments, right?
Yeah.
Because once again, there becomes a independence there on someone else, on others, not just others taking, but there becomes a dependence on us feeling whole by us having to give. So there's a withdrawal there as
Mhm.
well. And so having that support system there when you're having that moment and you're having that breakdown in the late hour, it could be in the middle of the day or something triggers you and that person is not, or that thing is not in your life anymore. And putting in place those things in people that are healthy for you, that's going to encourage you and say, I understand. It's okay. No, it's not your fault. No, you don't have to feel guilty. You don't owe that to them, but you
Mhm.
do owe it to yourself to be happy. You do owe it to yourself to have a secure lifestyle. You do owe it to yourself to be able to say no when you don't feel like it.
Mhm.
Because sometimes we just don't feel like it. But as women, we are nurturers. We're created to as nurturers, and so we just want to nurture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you say, how much is too much nurturing?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
just taking those steps, it's not going to happen in a couple seconds. It's not going to even happen in that moment that you make that decision. But
Yeah.
once again, work a plan.
Mhm.
Always establish a plan.
Mhm.
Establish a plan with someone. And so that's where my work comes in. And I think we talked about this last week. And that's with everything and anything. And even licensed clinical um, therapists have kind of stepped out of the role of therapy to more coaching because they have really identified the difference where they're saying, my God, I've had clients where when I'm coaching, we
Mhm.
set a plan, we set goals, and the plan of how to get to those goals and work their goals. And they're happy and they're whole, but they still got a little work in maybe 6 months, a year, 18 months. But then in the role of the therapist and practitioner, some of them have admitted that sometimes it gets hard because here you have 15 years down the line, you have an individual that's still dependent
Mhm.
on them just to function every day. They've
Yeah.
never found a way to bring themselves out and to feel whole enough, strong enough, or powerful enough
Mhm.
to walk life on their own. And
Yeah.
not saying that there's anything wrong with it because we don't know what boundaries has been crossed. Sometimes
Mhm.
multiple layers. You have body boundaries, time boundaries, space boundaries, money boundaries, and we have all that included. A lot of times we find that when someone has been um, dealing with abuse
Yeah.
in those different forms, those layers do need to be worked out. But
Yeah.
once again, always plan, always have a support network with you, um,
Mhm.
and always remember it's okay to carry those two powerful letters with you as all times is your tools.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
not today. No, not now.
Mhm.
No, and it's
Yeah.
going to take consistent work.
Yeah, and it definitely does. And I'm glad that you mentioned that that is something that you actually offer as a life coach. Guys, if you're just now tuning in, thank you for tuning in to Practical Living. I have Treyonda Towns. If you feel that Treyonda has really resonated with you, all of her contact information is in the description box. This is really one of the ways that we maintain just being interactive with you. Lakeisha, you're really just asking some great questions.
Thank
Um,
you.
and so, yeah, we really do appreciate that. And thank you so much for sharing it with a couple of people as well. And I think one of the things that I had to ask God to help me with when I said that I struggled with speaking up for myself. If you know that setting boundaries is difficult for you, just ask God for that boldness to begin to say no. to begin to say no and not feel that you have to owe that individual an explanation.
Yes.
Just when you say no, that's it.
That's it. That's
You don't owe anybody an explanation. And I always say, like, I don't know, I always joke with this and say, are you paying my bills? And so if you're not paying my bills, then I don't owe you nothing. So but how can you help someone understand that it's not selfish for them to really set professional and personal boundaries?
Well, on behalf of the individual that's doing the work, continue to work with them on those things within themselves. A lot of times at that point, self-esteem boundaries have been crossed or manipulated to the point where that's where the work is probably needed the most. And so focusing the work there will probably be the first priority. On the other hand, when it comes to the person that's that's going to be receiver of you setting those boundaries and taking your power back, you don't owe them. You don't owe them the right for them to understand. They may never understand, whether they say they do or don't, because a lot of times they're not thinking about your needs. They're thinking about their needs. And so just finding that place where you feel safe, because sometimes individuals just don't feel safe. We can be honest with that too. They just don't feel safe. And so we're not talking in a manner of in a situation where someone is in an abusive situation. And let's get that clear as well. Let's make sure that's understood, because most definitely we don't want anyone to be harmed or deal with any more harm that's dealing with an abusive place. Just know that there is help for you. There are resources for you, and everything should be focused around a plan. So, keeping that mindful, we're going to, having that disclosure out there. If you feel unsafe or it is an abusive type of scenario, situation, there are resources to help you with that. But in light of it's just a situation of boundaries being crossed, everyday relationships or persona just being out at your workplace, at your gym, at the grocery store, things like that.
Yeah, you got to let people know when they don't see you standing there, because I'm only 5'2", and I know people be seeing me, and then they try to get right in front of me. I'm like, excuse me, you got to speak up, because they will get in front of you. I'm like, excuse me, line is back there. So, but yeah, you got to do it. It is a daily thing sometimes. When you have allowed people to cross those boundaries so much. And I think that if you become so used to it, maybe you don't even recognize it as something that needs to change. But I know that we're talking a lot to people who needs to set those boundaries. We might have some people that's watching that may be those individuals that cross those boundaries, And so if you know that you are the type of person that's always asking, maybe you should look within yourself and say, man, maybe I'm asking too much of this individual. What would you say to those individuals that are the boundary crossers?
Well, it's all about respect, right? Boundaries is not non-inclusive of having respect, right? Being mindful that you too want individuals to respect your limitations
Mm-hmm.
and not taking it personal.
Yeah.
That sense of entitlement is not entitled to you,
Right.
right? Especially from someone that has not taken that commitment, right? And there's some areas where there's commitment, and I do understand that in some cultures,
Mm-hmm.
right, when we talk about boundaries, could be considered a form of disrespect. So we're
Yeah.
not even talking about in that area either. We're not,
Mm-hmm.
going against anyone's cultural practices or things like that, or where someone will be harmed. But we're talking about just basic life practices right now, practical
Mm-hmm.
living, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and just being mindful of that. Just being mindful of that, not having that respect of boundaries for someone else is doing harm. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you do harm to others, look at yourself. What are you willing to do to repair that harm?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because once again, maybe you didn't know. Maybe individuals don't know that they've caused harm by always
Yeah.
being demanding, always needing someone's time. And a lot of times those things are out of fear. It's not always out of a malicious act or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. Sometimes it could be out of fear. It could be that the individual is broken and that they're in a place where they need. But once again, communication is always,
Mm-hmm.
always a valuable asset in any situation.
Yeah.
And so finding space, finding the right way and the right time to
Mm-hmm.
have those conversations is always good. It's always good, but most definitely not in the height of our emotions. I've been
Mm-hmm.
there,
Yeah.
right? Not saying anything until it's too late. And then when you do communicate, you're exploding and you're spilling over.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I had been in that comfortable place or had learned how to practice setting healthy and safe boundaries, things would not have gone so far to
Mm-hmm.
where those boundaries were established in an unhealthy manner,
Right.
right? We're talking about sharing too much information, feeling responsible,
Mm-hmm.
or feeling guilty for others' happiness. Those are unhealthy characteristics of setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Like feeling weak in your own identity, inability to say no, which we've
Yeah.
said that all over again, and having that, and just not taking responsibility for your own life, because at that
Mm-hmm.
point, you're not being responsible for your own life because you're leaving yourself, or um, that person has left someone else in a space of not having their own needs met because they've taken so much
Mm-hmm.
and don't have any remorse for it.
Yeah.
Walk
Yeah.
away and go to the next one. And so those are the manners. And when we're talking about, you can't be responsible for someone else's happiness. Um, and most definitely find what's within you that feel the need to be the enabler of someone else staying broken, or I don't like to say we're broken, but not whole or not being their best self.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the questions that um, we may need to ask ourselves, individuals that do not set those boundaries, is what hole am I trying to fulfill within myself
Yeah.
by always being the person that somebody can depend on? Because maybe you like that attention, maybe you like that person always to come to you. But if you know that you're not able to be there, maybe for the family members that do need your help, like maybe your kids,
Mhm.
your young kids that need your help, or maybe you're not able to accomplish your goals because you're always putting time towards and energy towards this other individual.
Mhm.
So I feel like you really had to begin to prioritize what's important to you in
Mhm.
your life. And
Yes.
so I just think that we have to be mindful of what's our priorities and how we are going to achieve those goals that we really set in our life, even if it's just daily goals.
Daily goals. And it goes back to the, I guess when we first started out, that how do we deal with that rejection thing? Because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times that's where that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
um I know for me, at a point, it came from a point of all just needing that validation,
Yeah.
right? And that came from just from my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
um just trying. And so if you don't deal with it then, or is never identified, you do grow up into adulthood, and still may operate in that spirit or that realm of needing validation, um, whether it's conscious or subconsciously needing that validation that you are worthy, you are okay, you have done good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your fault. But when you always in a realm of being manipulated, or people making you feel like it's your fault for their faults,
Inadequacies. Mm-hmm. Yep.
their lack, their shortcomings, um, and you've never worked that out, um, you do find yourself operating in that. And so getting to that place of, once again, going back to the board and once the priorities,
Mm-hmm.
making yourself a priority, dealing with that first,
Yeah.
right? You're responsible for you. But even as a parent and a young child, it's important to set boundaries, even with children. Because if
Mm-hmm.
we're not, we're not doing them any good, right? We're putting them at risk for harm.
Yeah.
We're setting a stage for them to have this false sense of entitlement
Yeah.
and ideology of the world. And we know the world is not getting ready to give you anything but some hurt, some
Yeah.
some disappointments, and some destruction.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so boundaries there are important too. Healthy boundaries are there too,
Mm-hmm.
are important there as well.
Definitely. And I know one of the things that really helped me, because you sometimes these individuals that you have to have this conversation with, and the type of person that they are. Meaning, Treyonda, if you talk to me, some most of the times I'm not the type of person that can just sit there and listen. Like, I interject, and I had to tell myself, Martinique, let them finish. Or I might even need to just have a piece of paper so I can write down
Good.
so I can write down what I need to say so I don't forget. And I think one of the things that has helped me is to write a person a letter, because it allows me to say everything that I want to say without being interrupted,
Yes.
without um with me being able to say everything that I want to say. And
Okay.
so one of the things Lakeisha just asked was, how do you work through not trying to be perfect?
Well, once again, that goes back to finding yourself in the midst of the layers of always being told or always being made to feel like you're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always going to be something or someone wanting more or wanting you to be more. But the only individual that's it's most important to is you, right? You accepting, receiving, and understanding that you are more than enough. You were created as you. You are who you are. You are who you were created to be, and you are more than enough. And there's, once again, that perfectionism thing, a lot of times is activated by that thing of rejection, by that need to be validated,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of times stems from the root of our self-esteem being crushed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's how a lot of times we get caught in that web,
Mm-hmm.
of being the one always giving and others taking from us. Um, because we had been encircled by those, um, that was always taking advantage of their need to be validated.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get a little close and you think, okay, here comes the peace and the acceptance, and then bam, here comes someone out the corner, and
Yeah.
it's like, did you just say that to me?
Uh-huh.
What do you, did you just do that to me? Uh,
Uh-huh.
I matter. I
Mm-hmm.
matter just like she mattered. I gave just like she gave or he gave, but yet that wasn't good enough. And so just being mindful, it has nothing to do with you,
Mm-hmm.
right? I had
Mm-hmm.
to learn that's not my stuff. I had to learn how to give people their stuff back, you know, give it right back.
Yeah.
You keep that right over there, because what you're putting on me to deal with has nothing to do with me. It has to do with you. And
Mm-hmm.
so with that, your sense of entitlement belongs to you, and I'm not at liberty, and I'm not what's the word, responsible
Mm-hmm.
for filling that gap and that void for you. But I am responsible for healing and filling that gap and that void for me.
Right.
And working on that plan, whatever it takes, and finding the best tools that'll help me get there. Like you say, journaling,
Mm-hmm.
writing it down, write down those negative feelings that bring, right, identifying what your triggers are. And a lot of times it's not always a visual, especially when you've held it down and you've suppressed it so long. After a while it becomes physical,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something minute as a song, a celebration, um, even not even celebrating your accomplishments at times. Why don't you feel worthy of celebrating your accomplishments,
Right.
right? And all that has a root cause,
Mm-hmm.
to what you have been, I would say, been put on you.
Mm-hmm.
um, and not always, sometimes we say as a small child, but sometimes people can still come up in a healthy childhood, but as you go out into life,
Yep.
um, sometimes that unhealthy boundaries, or those boundaries that wasn't set,
Mm-hmm.
um, leaves a blindfold to how to set those boundaries once they're out in the world by themselves, like going away to college or just going on that trip with your friends, or those different things like that. And so how you bounce back, literally, like you say, that plan,
Mm-hmm.
working that plan, and getting someone that will walk with you through that, and not so much as teaching you, but just being an accountability partner for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Helping you to recognize, because like you said, sometimes you may not recognize the triggers. You
Yeah.
may not recognize, you were okay, but the moment, you had to face that, or you went to do this, oh, you started having a headache, or your back started hurting, or, you know, man, you want a snack again, are you
That's good.
nervous? You're running your hands, or you're shaking in your seat. Um, you know, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
What were you thinking, or what is that sensation at that time? And so being able to be comfortable in a space where you won't be judged.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that's where it comes, that fear. Those boundaries are not set because that fear of being judged, not so much as even the rejection, but just even being judged. No one wants to be judged,
Mm-hmm.
um, in a negative way. Yeah, we want to be judged and get the awards and rewards all the time, but no one wants someone sitting around and looking for our flaws. We
Mm-hmm.
know we all have them, but we don't
Yeah.
need someone else pointing them out to us all the time.
That's good. That's
Mm.
good. And I'm just really thankful that we're able to just openly discuss this topic, because I know a lot of people, they struggle with it. They struggle with being a people pleaser, or internalizing and feeling bad about saying no to someone. Even if they do have the time or the means to help someone, but it's okay, to say no to individuals. And so I thank you all for just taking time to watch another episode of Practical Living. Make sure that you tune in next week. Also, Treyonda, I just really appreciate you for just being on the show as well.
I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
You're
Um,
welcome.
yes,
You're
I
welcome.
think it is an honor. Never take it for granted.
You
Yes.
definitely. Thank you. And I appreciate that. And so, guys, if you're watching this episode and you really feel that you would like to just take some time and talk more with Treyonda, all of her contact information is in the description box. Make sure that you go ahead and follow and like our Facebook pages. If we're not friends already on Facebook, what are you waiting for? Just send me a friend request so you can always be notified of the different shows that I have. Also, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to Martinique the Storyteller. If you really like the shows that I produce, you are welcome to always just give a financial gift. My GoFundMe campaign link is in the description box as well. No gift is too small. So I do want to just mention that. But I hope you guys just really have a blessed night. And I hope that this episode really just helped you to learn that um, it's okay. You know, it's okay to set boundaries. And the more boundaries we begin to set, the more respect that we begin to have and
Yes.
just implement in our life, the more people will begin to respect us as individuals. So I hope you all have a great night again, and don't forget to share this video. Have a great night. Bye bye.